So let's take a look at reading Thai, the Thai alphabets. And I'm going to be reviewing this book, Reading and Writing Thai, by Jintana Ratana Kemakorn. What a last name. But let's take a look inside the book. And here we have the consonants of the Thai alphabets. And it says here there are 44 letters. And you'll notice that some of the sounds, like the t sounds here, has 6 different letters that could be used. So that might be confusing. I know in English we often have letters which have multiple sounds or multiple letters for the same sounds. I'm not sure if we have quite 6 different letters for those same sounds. So that's kind of an interesting thing. We also have ending consonants, which I'll get to in a moment. And we have vowels. So one thing that I want to look at before I get into the consonants and the vowels is down here, the tones. So Thai is a tonal language, which means you could say the same sounds, but depending on how you pitch your voice, the meaning could change. So for example, in the example here, we have ka. You could have the mid-tone just straight through the middle, ka, or you could have low as like ka, or you could have falling like ka, or you could have high like ka, ka, or you could have rising like ka. And depending on which tone you use, it could mean either getting stuck, galanga, which is a plant in the ginger family, could mean servants, could mean trade, or it could mean leg. So as you can see, these are pretty different words, and the sound ka is exactly the same. It's just different based on how you say it, whether it's ka or ka. The other interesting thing you'll notice is that even though the sound is the same, they use, it looks like 2 different letters to represent the same KH sounds. So we'll get into that a little bit more later. But something I wanted to show you is that if you know already, Mandarin Chinese also has tones. They have 4 tones, or maybe 5 if you count the no tone as a tone. But basically this is Chinese in the Chinese scripts. And then this is Chinese in Pinyin. And you'll notice that it has these accent marks. And these accent marks tell you which tone to use. So for this one, it would be rising tones, so it would be ru. And then this one, it goes down and then up, so like 我你能读懂这个给我发信息吧? So I think this is a very clever way to write the Chinese language. I think if the Chinese language ever dropped these Chinese characters, which by the way, there's no way to really know how to pronounce these characters just by looking at them. Each character is for one word or one meaning. You can also combine the characters to get new words or other words. But basically you have to learn 2,000 to 3,000 characters to be able to read Chinese. And if you want to be more educated, you have to learn even more characters. I think there are 50,000 Chinese characters, but to be able to do most things in normal life, you need to know 2,000 to 3,000, which is quite daunting to the beginner or someone who wants to learn Chinese. If they were just to use the Roman alphabets with these accent marks, you would be able to read Chinese without needing to learn 2,000 to 3,000 characters. And you would get just the same meaning as you would by looking at this. However, we have cultural reasons, we have historical reasons for why we want to keep these characters. And if you already know the Chinese characters, well, it actually becomes almost easier to read them when you see it like this. But anyway, going back to Thai, you can see they have some symbol marks as well For example, this is the low, this is the falling, high, rising. Now, if I were to design this, and if you've studied Mandarin Chinese before, you probably would do it the same way I would. But I would make this one falling because it looks like it's falling from left to right instead of low. I would make this one high because it looks like an arrow pointing up. I would make this one rising because it looks like it's going up from left to right. And this one I would make low because it looks like an arrow pointing down. But, for whatever reason, whoever made this interpretation, they did it this way. So if you've studied Pinyin before, just remember, because when you see it like this, you're going to want to do a falling tone, but it's actually just a low tone. So keep that in mind. Anyway, moving on, here are the letters for the Thai scripts, a little bit bigger. Now, if we were to look at an Asian language or a foreign language writing system, how would we know which language it is? So for Mandarin Chinese, I just showed you this phrase, which is 如果你能读懂这个，给我发信息吧. And this, you can see it's a lot of complicated characters all the way through. For Japanese, we have これが読めたら俺にメッセージを送ってくれ, which you'll see there are some complicated characters, but they're interspersed by simpler looking characters. And the reason for this is because when Japan imported the Chinese writing system to write their own language, Japanese, Japanese had a lot of grammar that the Chinese language did not have. So Japan actually developed two alphabets, hiragana and katakana, to write the grammar portions of their language, as well as some other things like foreign loanwords. And that's why you get a mixture of the Chinese characters, these complicated looking ones, with the simpler looking alphabet characters. So that's how you can tell if it's Japanese or if it's Chinese. When we get to Korean, we have something altogether different. And this is because it's using the Hangul alphabet, which was created by King Sejong the Great in 1446. So let's see if I can read this. 이거 읽을 수 있으면 나한테 메시지 보내줘. And basically, when you look at this, you can see that has circles. Or I guess they kind of look like ovals when they're scrunched up like this. But you'll see circles in the script, and that's how you can tell that it's not Chinese or Japanese. Japanese sometimes has circles. I wrote this character. You can see there's a circle in the upper right, which just changes the sound of this alphabet letter. And then some of the characters kind of look like they have circles like this one at the bottom. But in Korean, the circles are much bigger. And so that's how you can tell that's Korean. It also looks a lot different because you have lines, vertical lines coming in, horizontal lines like this, a lot of them that you don't really see very much of in Chinese or Japanese. Now when we get down to Thai, they also have circles, as you can see, but the circles are much smaller. The other thing is the letters, they look more squiggly. Like you can see a squiggle here, a squiggle there. They're more curved than Korean. And so you can tell that it's Thai by the small circles and the curves. But let's see if I can read this. I just learned Thai, so this is going to be interesting if I can read this. But I believe it's Ta An Ni Dai Song Kok Wam Ma Ha Pom Na. So not bad. Now, the Thai scripts actually came from Old Khmer, from the Old Khmer script, which originally came from a script called Pallava in India in the 7th century. Now, apparently the Thai alphabet was created by King Ramkhamhaeng in 1283, according to a stone inscription that we found in Sukhothai. Now, I wanted to take a look actually at what Thai looks like compared to modern Khmer, because both these alphabets come from Old Khmer. And you can see, firstly, that Thai has this letter, which is the vowel sound A. And we can see in Khmer, there's also this kind of A sound that looks like a cane. And these languages both have that. You can see this K sound looks like upside down U. This also has an upside down U with an additional wavy line, which you're going to see in Khmer comes up quite often. But yeah, you can see they kind of look similar. Like this one looks like kind of like a backwards S on side with this circle here. This one looks like a backwards S but more upright with the circle there. This one looks like an upside down U with the inner circle coming from the left. Same thing with Khmer with the additional wavy line. I noticed though that some of the letters, for example in Thai, if you start with the circle and then go down to the right, it goes back up and to the left. Whereas Khmer has the same thing, but it's more like it goes down and to the left and up. See, they both have this circle and they go down around. But this one in Thai, it goes down to the right and to the left. This one, Khmer, it goes down and to the left. Like you can see here with Cha, they both have these two circles like so, but Thai goes left to right, up and around. Khmer goes right to left, up, and then into the wavy line. So that's just a quick look at the Thai and Khmer scripts. Let's go back to Thai though. So if we look at Thai, they have something called classes of consonants, which is every consonant is grouped into either mid, high, or low. And I'm going to explain in a little bit why this is important, but you have to know which classification each consonant belongs to in order to get the tones correctly. So I will explain that more in just a moment. But let's take a look. So after some writing practice, we have vowels. Now, the interesting thing about vowels is they can appear on the right. This line, by the way, is just a placeholder mark for the consonant sound. So like if you see the example over here, you have the consonant and then you have the A, which is this symbol. So you have it to the right. But here's where it gets interesting. You can also have the vowel above the consonant, or below the consonant, or to the left and the right, or the top and the right, or just to the left. If you get into the diphthongs, it could be left, top, and right, or anything top and right. Now this wasn't so crazy to me because right now I'm learning Sanskrit, and Sanskrit uses the Devanagari script along with Hindi, Marathi, and some other Indian languages. So this is what a phrase of Sanskrit looks like. If I can read it, it says, Yadi tvam etad patitum shaknosi mam samdesham preshaya. And so you'll see that the consonant sound, for example, the K sound, the K sound looks like this. It's basically a letter with this horizontal line at the top. You'll notice that all the characters have horizontal lines at the top. Now, if you have a short I sound and E sound with the K sounds, then you write the vowel to the left. I suppose you could also say it's the top and the left because you have this connecting it, but it's to the left. If you have a longer E sound like E instead of E, then ki becomes this with the long vowel sound, the long E to the right, as well as this top connecting it. If you want to do the E sound, the E, the E, ke, then you add this top line above it. And if you want to say ku, then you add this u vowel to the bottom of the consonant. So in Devanagari, the vowel sound can appear to the left, right, above, or below, just like Thai and Khmer. Now, this is because Devanagari actually came from, I believe, the ancient Pallava script, the Brahmi script in India. So they're all kind of descended from the same writing scripts. So let's go back to Thai now. And we can see, after we get our writing practice in, there's something called ending consonants. And there are two classifications. There's the stop ending, where you have a sound that just stops, like ka, ta, pa. You notice that the sound just stops. Or you have a live ending, where it kind of persists. The sound persists, like wo. So this is important later when we decide how to write the tone marks. So you need to know which ending you're using, whether it's a stop ending or a live ending, in order to determine which tone mark you use with the word. I'm going to explain that more carefully in just a moment. So when I saw this tone marks, I thought, wow, this is amazing. They have an alphabet with these tone marks that they add to tell you which tone the word is. And when I first saw this, I thought it was going to be like Pinyin, where you always have the tone mark above the vowel sounds, and it tells you exactly which tone to use. However, in Thai, it's a little bit trickier than that. It's actually very tricky. And so I'm going to explain why that is. However, just as the basic premise, you add these tone marks above the letter. If it is a low, falling, high, rising, you use these tone marks. So here's where it gets tricky. Remember how I said all the consonants are grouped into mid, low, and high consonant classification? Well, that comes into play when we decide which tone to write or use. The other thing that comes into play is whether the vowel sound is a long vowel or a short vowel, whether it's ah or ah. And the other thing is whether we use a stop ending or a live ending, which we'll get to in a moment. And then lastly, we have the tone mark, and that will decide what we actually use. So to show you what this means here, this basically, if we have a mid-consonant, which is any one of these, and we have a long vowel, so ga in this case, if there's no tone mark, then it's just a flat tone. However, if it's a short vowel, so it's ga instead of ga, then it becomes a low tone. So this is ga and this is ga. So that's a bit tricky, because if you want a low tone with the long vowel ga, then you have to add the tone mark here. So it's a bit tricky. You'll notice that some of these are blanked out, and I believe that's because you can't have an actual mid-consonant with a short vowel that has, for example, a falling tone, which is what this is. You can only have a low tone or a high tone, in which case if it's a high tone, you add the high mark above the letter like so. So yeah, that's a bit tricky, because if you don't know whether it's a long vowel or a short vowel, you don't know whether it's going to be just a flat tone or a low tone. So if we, here we have the high consonants with the vowels, the endings, and the tone marks. Let's take a look at one with the ending. Here we go. So this is the mid-consonants. We have the long vowels, the short vowels, the tone marks, and we have the live ending and the stop ending. So what this means is, if you have a long vowel, like in this case we have gan, and we have the short vowel, gan. In this case, if it's a live ending, it's just flat tone. But if it's a stop ending, like you have a k at the end instead of an at the end, and it's a long vowel or a short vowel, then it becomes a low tone. Unless, of course, you have one of these markers, in which case, if you have this marker, it becomes a high tone. Or if it's a live ending and you have this mark, then it becomes a descending or a falling tone. Now be careful. You see this one, this here, and this one here. Let me see if I can zoom in a bit. They look very similar, but if you look closely, they're actually different. This one kind of has this point after the circle. This one just has a straight swoosh, like the Nike swoosh or something like that. So just be careful. This means a descending or falling tone. This one just means the short ah sound. So yeah, that's basically it. And you can see that it can be very tricky because depending if it's a high consonant, a low consonant, whether it's a live ending or stop ending. I mean, the low consonant stop ending case, if it's a long vowel, then becomes a falling tone, but if it's a short vowel, it becomes a high tone, right? So it's very tricky. You just have to memorize this set of rules, and that's just how it goes. But the interesting thing, the last thing I'll really cover is, let me see if I can find it. Basically, they have something where if you have this letter here and it precedes a low consonant, it changes the tone mark rules to a high consonant rule set. So even though these are low consonants and you would expect to follow those low consonant rules I showed you before, if you have this preceding letter, you don't pronounce it, but it changes the vowel, the tone marks, to the high to the high consonant tone rules. So that becomes a bit tricky. Anyway, there are some other extraneous things, for example, irregular readings, but I won't get into that too much. That's basically it for the main part of the Thai alphabets. Now, I think it's very interesting because you might think this is very confusing, especially writing the tones and all that. But I think when it comes to reading, it's actually quite different how we read. For example, when you're reading English and you read the word, say, cat, you might think, oh, I see the C sound, so it's ka, and then it's A sound, so it's a, and then T, t, so it's cat. But actually, we don't just look at the individual letters. The way we read is we look at the word as a whole, and then we see it's a three-letter word with CAT. We look at the letters at the same time, and then we say, oh, that's cat. So I think similarly with Thai, when you begin to learn an alphabet like Thai, then you're just going to see words like this, and you're going to know, oh, this is Chan, which means I. You know, you're just going to see this, you're going to recognize this Chan, and it's I. You're not going to think, oh, is it a low consonant or a high consonant? Is it a short vowel, a long vowel? Is it a stop ending or a live ending? Which vowel sound, which tone mark should I use? Basically, you'll begin to recognize the words as wholes, and then you'll be able to just speak naturally that way. Anyway, I hope this video was illuminating for you on how to read Thai. Thai seems like such a great alphabet, a great language. I knew when I started to learn the basics and wanted to become conversational in it, I had to learn how to read Thai because it looks like such an interesting alphabet. It's very rewarding to be able to read it. So if you're going to be learning how to read Thai, I highly recommend it. And I hope this helped you. Thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.